My heart seized as the blast knocked me into darkness, every breath stolen by shredded lungs and bone-deep agony. Crawling 250 yards through gravel and blood, I felt life slip through my fingers, until I saw the soft glow of a world beyond pain. Above me floated my own still body, 5 medics fighting to bring me back, and I realized death was no final chapter but a doorway. This is the story of the light I found in the void, and why every scar now carries the promise of salvation. Raised in a devout household, faith always felt distant, an abstract concept. After 8 arduous years handling logistics in Iraq, I signed my final contract in Kandahar in 2012, believing it would pave my way back. Yet, on the morning of that flight, an oppressive sense of foreboding settled in my chest, more suffocating than my body armor. I woke before sunrise in a rented townhouse on the edge of Fort Worth, Texas. My phone buzzed with a message from my mother, "Praying for your safety, always." I swiped it away and rolled over, only to find my cold coffee cup balanced precariously on the nightstand. One gulp burned my tongue raw, the stale brew tasting of regrets I couldn't name yet. I set the mug down and let the bitterness chase away the last traces of sleep. By 6 a.m., I was behind the wheel of my pickup, rumbling toward the airport. The dashboard clock glowed orange, 5:47. 8 years of convoys, airlifts, and improvised bases in Iraq had taught me that every minute counted. My uniform hung in the back seat, tan fatigues crisp from the cleaners, boots polished but worn at the heels. I'd learned long ago not to get too comfortable in one place. At home, the nightstand was piled with family photos. My wedding portrait from 6 months ago, Mom and Dad smiling stiffly in church clothes, my wife's hand resting on my shoulder as we bought our first house. I'd left that life half-built, convinced I was chasing something, purpose maybe, or paychecks big enough to set us up for good. My grandparents had raised me on Bible verses and Sunday school hymns, but their certainty never lodged in my bones. Instead, I carried a restless ache that no sermon could fill. After a quick stop at the bakery for a pastry, only to find yesterday's cinnamon roll stale and dry, I made my way to the terminal. My parents were there, blinking in the harsh fluorescent light. I hugged my wife tightly, tasting the faint cinnamon sugar still clinging to my fingertips. My mother's eyes glistened with unshed tears. She pressed a small cross into my hand, murmuring, "Trust him." I nodded, though my faith felt brittle, like porcelain on the verge of shattering. Boarding the chartered flight to Dubai, I strapped myself into the cramped seat and stared at the aisle light blinking green. My thoughts floated back to dusty Iraqi airstrips, to endless columns of trucks rumbling through desert wind, to the hum of generators that never seemed to rest. I'd earned every dollar on those contracts, but the price had been my certainty, my pockets of peace. I closed my eyes and ran my tongue along my teeth, tasting the lingering grit of too many crossings. That afternoon in Kandahar, I moved into a fortified compound with old Marines and Special Forces vets. They welcomed me as one of their own. But camaraderie couldn't erase the unease that crept in at night, when mortar rounds rumbled in the distance, and the wind carried the sharp scent of cordite. I lay on a stretcher under netting, the moonlight washing the gravel in pale lamplight. My breath came in shallow rhythms, and I wondered how many more sunrises I'd see. On my first leave home that summer, I had an unshakable foreboding, a knot in my gut that made every laugh feel hollow. The morning I returned to duty, I downed beers with old friends until my head spun. I recall saying goodbye through a haze, telling Mom to watch over my wife and kids because I might not come back. I don't remember those words. I only remember the weight of dread as I stumbled onto the plane. I didn't know it yet, but that morning, when faith felt like a stranger and fear felt like a companion, would rewrite everything I thought I knew about life and death. The details are hazy now, but somehow I managed to get my gear on and crawl 250 yards toward my friend's door. My lung had given out. I was losing blood rapidly, and then my heart ceased to beat. I came to in a haze of pain, blinking up at a sky I'd last seen through dusty transport windows. My rifle lay beside me, muzzle buried in the coarse gravel. The world trembled beneath a low, keening ache that radiated from my left side. I tasted grit and warm iron when I gasped, wet copper that coated my tongue and throat. My breath caught in my chest, each inhale a jagged blade carving through muscle. Stars winked indifferently overhead as I lay face down, combat vest mangled by the blast. The vest's plating pressed into my ribs, grinding against flesh that felt torn and ragged. Somewhere deep in my gut, a dull drumbeat echoed, my pulse sputtering and weak. I didn't think. Instinct drove me onward. I forced my head up on one elbow, vision swimming, and eyed the faint glow of the metal hooch door downrange. The blast had come without warning, a buried IED detonating beneath our vehicle, flinging me into the darkness beyond. I'd felt the walls of my lungs collapse, an emptiness where breath used to live. And then the world had pitched me to the ground. Pain had fractured into a dozen jagged shards, each nerve ending alight with fire. I knew then that my time was slipping through open fingers. Hands shook as I fumbled for my helmet strap and yanked it loose. My vision flared with each movement, red rims blooming around the edges of sight. I tasted desperation in the air, a hunger to survive beyond the odds stacked against me. With a grunt that tore from my throat, I rolled onto my back, legs splayed, and tested the weight in my limbs. My arms still functioned. My legs did not. They lay inert as strips of leather. I dropped to my forearms and began what felt like my last crawl, body dragging across gravel, boots kicking up pellets that bit into raw skin. Every inch was agony, rocks embedding in palms, ribs grinding beneath sternum. My armor scraped the earth, each clank a bitter reminder of flesh I no longer owned. I scraped forward, propelled by the thought of my best friend, the pararescue jumper who once patched soldiers on the battlefield. He could save me if I just reached him. Time fractured as the cold night air whipped against my face. My breath came in ragged pants that tasted of blood and grit. My vision narrowed to 2 points. The smeared outline of the hooch door and a murmur of voices. Shouts of alarm from fellow expats. I gripped the door frame with trembling fingers and dragged my torso upright, shoving my weight inside. Silence greeted me for a moment, punctuated only by my own ragged breathing. Then my friend's door burst open, and he loomed above me, face pale, eyes wide. He didn't hesitate. He swiped his arm beneath my shoulders, lifting me into the harsh light of flashlights and gun barrels. I felt a surge of relief. Then the world tipped sideways and darkness pulled me under again. I vaguely recall being loaded into the back of a Humvee, adrenaline masking the worst of the pain. Shouting voices pressed around me as tires crunched over gravel, and the thrum of a running engine blurred into a roar. My vision flickered. Dusty night, harsh fluorescent lights in a tent, the sickly glare of surgical lamps. In the Roll 3 medical bay at Kandahar Airfield, chaos reigned. I heard the metallic snap of gloves, the clatter of medical trays, and terse commands, some frantic, some resigned. I felt hands tearing at my armor, probes probing the wound, cold masks pressed over my face. My mind struggled to hold on to coherence. I tried to speak, only a gurgle escaped. A doctor leaned close, eyes flicking over my chart. I caught the word contractor and saw hesitation flash across his face. I felt his gloved hand press against my chest, counting my heartbeats. I sensed his breath catch. Then came the compression. Hands pounding rhythmically against my sternum, each thrust a violent push toward anything that might remain of life. I heard the hiss of oxygen, the cry of "clear," and then a high-voltage shock that rippled through me, wrenching muscles into spasms. I tasted burning plastic, defibrillator pads scorching my skin, and then the worst seizure of pain as my ribs threatened to crack. 1, 2, 3 beats. A stumble in the rhythm. Then, flatline. The monitors shifted from frantic bleeps to a single, unbroken tone. It felt like the world had exhaled and left me adrift. The sense of pain vanished entirely, replaced by a hollow silence so vast it roared in my ears. No scent of antiseptic, no glare of lamps, no weight of gear. Only a quiet nothingness stretched in all directions. In that suspended moment, I sensed the boundaries of my body dissolve. I was both everywhere and nowhere, stripped of fear and burden. And then, before I could even comprehend the absence, there was no before, only the timeless hush of oblivion. For a heartbeat, I lingered in that void. And then, as if called by some distant trumpet, the void swallowed itself. Time lost all meaning as I floated above my own body, observing the frantic activity of the medics below. The agony had vanished, replaced by a quiet buoyancy that lifted me beyond physical form and fear. I felt no gravity, only a gentle buoyancy that carried me upward, as though the very air had become liquid. The tent's white canvas roof receded until it was no more than a distant ceiling, and beneath me the scene of my own rescue flattened into a silent tableau. 5 figures in scrubs bent and moved in slow motion, their gloved hands darting for defibrillator paddles, ventilator tubing, IV lines. I hovered roughly 3 feet above the stretcher, close enough to see the sweat bead on a medic's brow, but removed enough to feel a calm detachment stranger than any battlefield adrenaline. The scent of antiseptic and the metallic bite of blood on the air, once so sharp, dissolved into nothingness. My ears, now free of monitors' beeps and radios' static, detected instead a low, resonant hum, like the distant echo of a cathedral organ. That hum seemed to pulse in time with what I recognized as my own heart's rhythm, only without pain. For the first time in decades, I sensed the steady beat of life unfiltered by fear or injury. I flexed limbs that no longer felt like mine. My arms curved in arcs above me, fingertips brushing the faint outline of the tent's support beams. There was no resistance, only smooth, liquid motion. I drifted laterally, passing through the blur of 4 poles and folding chairs, until I broke free of the medical equipment and entered an expanse of muted gray. The boundaries between floor and sky vanished. I was floating in a limitless void soft as wool, tinted the color of storm clouds before a hurricane. A memory rippled through that void, my wedding day in Fort Worth, the nervous knot in my stomach as I exchanged vows beneath a white gazebo. I smelled my wife's perfume, heard the laughter of friends and family, felt the weight of her hand in mine. That memory glowed behind my closed awareness, infusing the gray surrounding me with warmth. Behind it followed my mother's kitchen, humming with the scent of fresh-baked tortillas and coffee brewing on a gas stove, scenes of comfort I'd long taken for granted. Beyond those domestic echoes came the harsh tumble of desert nights in Iraq, the staccato of convoy engines over gravel, the orange flare of tracer rounds, the taste of dust that settled on my tongue like grit in a wound. Each memory hovered, a glowing orb that pulsed with the emotional resonance of place and feeling. They drifted around me, weaving a tapestry of my life's textures, joy and dread, longing and regret. As I hovered deeper into that gray expanse, a presence emerged at the periphery of my awareness, subtle at first, like a breath on the back of my neck. It rippled through the void as a wave of warmth richer than any sunlight, filling me with an unspoken reassurance. I turned, or rather, my perspective shifted, and saw a silhouette standing at the horizon of that boundless plain. It was neither human nor abstract, but a melding of both, a form defined by gentle contours and luminous edges. The presence beckoned with silent insistence. In response, the gray began to thin, revealing something beneath it. Threads of light, pale gold and rose, weaving through the void like the roots of an ancient tree. I realized those threads were paths, pathways connecting each memory orb to this central presence. Drawn by curiosity, I followed one filament back to its source in my youth, the sterile hospital corridor where, at 2.5 years old, I lay stricken with peritonitis. I smelled the antiseptic sting, felt my mother's hand shaking on my cheek as she begged God for my life. The memory cracked open, releasing a current of gratitude that rippled through me like a shock wave. With each heartbeat, the filament network tightened, converging on the luminous figure. My breathing, or the echo of it, grew shallow as I approached. Though no sound passed between us, understanding flowed freely. This was not judgment, but guidance, calling me home to something I'd forgotten. I felt the weight of every decision I'd made, the contracts taken, the missions endured, the nights I'd numbed my mind against dread. And I sensed compassion, an invitation to integrate every fragment of my story, the light and the shadow alike. A soft surge of energy pulsed from the figure, and the gray expanse quivered. I felt a tug at the core of my being, gentle yet irresistible, drawing me back toward the world of flesh and bone. The memory orbs faded, the threads of light recoiled, and the boundless void contracted around me. The resonance hummed once more, then slipped behind a narrowing portal of white. I breached the barrier with the suddenness of a falling stone. Gravity slammed into my limbs and agony surged as every injury reasserted itself. The hum of the universe snapped into the harsh beeps of the monitor. A pair of gloved hands shook my shoulders. "John, stay with us," I gasped, tasting the antiseptic sting in my nostrils and the sharp copper of blood on my tongue. My vision snapped into focus on a young nurse's face, eyes wide with hope and fear. My chest heaved, lungs burning for the air the ventilator forced in. And in that moment of raw, palpable return, I carried within me a secret warmth, proof that even in the grayest void, light endures. From the vast grayness, I stepped into the presence of an ancient tree, its roots intricately woven like a boundless sea of memories. My uncle, who had passed in 2011, stood leaning against its rugged trunk, and behind him my grandmother and Pawpaw Pete gazed at me, their eyes filled with an unearned love. The mist cleared into a soft, silver dawn as I stepped toward the massive tree, its trunk wider than any cathedral column I'd ever seen. The bark was etched with deep grooves that pulsed like veins, radiating a warmth that seemed to resonate with my own heartbeat. Each footfall on the mossy carpet beneath felt like stepping on the roof of the world, suspended between heavens and earth. I inhaled deeply and tasted the scent of rain-soaked soil, ancient and alive, as though the tree itself exhaled a welcome. My uncle appeared first. He wore the faded fatigues I remembered from backyard games as a kid, but his face was neither gaunt nor rigid. His hair, once streaked with the traces of his alcoholism, now lay soft and silver. He smiled without irony, as though he'd been waiting for me to arrive. In his eyes, I saw both the brotherly mischief of our youth and the sorrow of a life cut short, caught between my memories of him as a man and my knowledge of how he died. "Son," he said, his voice a gentle rumble in my mind, sounding like distant thunder rolling across a canyon, the single word wrapped around me like a cloak. I felt relief flood my chest, and tears rose unbidden, carving warm paths down my cheeks. Beyond him stood my grandmother, stern as she'd been in life yet softened by this place of light. Her hands were clasped in her lap, and she wore her favorite shawl, the one she'd knitted while humming old hymns. When she saw me, her gaze dropped. Not in contempt, but in recognition of the suffering I'd authored in service of distance and indifference. I felt the weight of her disappointment, not in judgment but as a challenge, to face the cruelty I'd done to others and to myself. And beside her was Pawpaw Pete, my grandfather's father, whose booming laugh used to fill Sunday dinners. He reached out, touching the knot of my shoulder with a certainty that stung. The touch was electric, and I felt every pang of guilt, every neglectful moment spent chasing adrenaline overseas, flare into my mind like a warning beacon. Yet within that surge of self-reproach bloomed compassion. I saw how much I'd been loved, how deeply they'd longed for me to come home whole. They did not speak in words. Instead, emotions unfurled between us, carried on a breeze that rustled the trees' leaves like applause. I sensed their longing not for my suffering, but for my healing. My grandmother's sadness flowed into me as a river of regret. My uncle's love flooded me with forgiveness, and Pawpaw Pete's steady pride infused me with hope I'd thought long dead. From the tree's base, a low hum emerged, an undercurrent of energy that I recognized as the same resonance I'd felt in the gray expanse. Roots coiled beneath my feet, and I perceived threads of light weaving through soil and stone, connecting me to every life that had ever drawn breath. In that moment, I knew the tree embodied the continuity of existence. Birth, death, and rebirth entwined in an endless cycle. A vision blossomed behind my inner eyelids, faces of the Afghan villagers I'd never looked at. Dusty, wary, their lives split open by foreign boots. I saw frightened children huddled behind doors, farmers staring after convoys of trucks like specters of intrusion. I felt the echo of their fear pulse through the roots beneath me, a reminder that my presence there had not been harmless. Shame welled, and I dropped to one knee, pressing my hands to the mossy ground as though in prayer. In that act, the tree's hum swelled into a chorus of light. I felt forgiveness pouring upward through the soil, a blessing that washed shame away without erasing its lesson. My uncle's hand pressed against my back. My grandmother's warmth enfolded me. Pawpaw, Pete's steady gaze imbued me with resolve. I realized that contrition without compassion was an open wound, and that to truly atone, I needed both acceptance of past harm and a commitment to change. The luminous presence I'd glimpsed in the void reappeared, standing just beyond the trio of elders. It glowed with the soft gold I'd come to know as unconditional love. It extended an invitation, not to abandon the world I'd left behind, but to re-enter it with a heart remade. I felt its question echo in my bones. Will you return? And in that silent query, I heard my own heart answer. Yes. As I rose to my feet, the elders faded into the morning light, my uncle's laugh trailing like a remembered melody, my grandmother's shawl flickering like a prayer, Pawpaw Pete's pride lingering like an ember. The tree's roots pulsed one last time, depositing a seed of remembrance in my soul. Every life I'd touched, every harm I'd inflicted, was part of this interconnected web. The gray expanse recoiled, and I felt the gentle tug of gravity returning. Roots dissolved into threads of light that winked out, and the silver dawn collapsed into the sterile white of the medical tent. I dropped through the veil with the speed of a falling star, pain slamming into my chest like a sledgehammer. The hum of the heart monitor roared back, and I gasped, lungs burning for air. Hands gripped my shoulders, yanking me upright. A doctor's urgent voice cut through the haze. "He's back. Stay with us." I smelled antiseptic. I tasted copper. I felt the rasp of 1,000 regrets and the steady pulse of new purpose. And in that sacred shock of return, I carried within me the seed of that ancient tree, a promise that love and forgiveness could root themselves even in the harshest soil. Consciousness returned with the biting scent of antiseptic and the heavy pressure of my chest plate against raw wounds. Monitors hummed and beeped nearby, and a doctor gently shook my shoulder, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and wonder. He's alive. How? My first breath was a razor's edge, slicing through unconsciousness. The world snapped into focus in brutal fragments. Fluorescent bulbs overhead, the hiss of the ventilator, the antiseptic sting that clung to every inhale. Pain exploded behind my ribs, a raw, electric agony that pulsed with every heartbeat. I groaned, and the groan cracked like glass, a testament to the damage done. A hand gripped my shoulder, and I felt the tremor of desperation in the gentle shake. I opened my eyes to a pair of incredulous blue ones, set above a face half hidden by a mask. "Mr. John, can you hear me?" the doctor asked, voice tight with relief and skepticism. When my eyelids fluttered, he let out a breath I felt more than heard. My lungs burned as I tried to speak. Only a rasp escaped. I fought to swallow, tasting copper on my tongue and the bitter tang of failure. My arms lay heavy across the sheet, each movement sending shockwaves of pain down my side. I felt the smooth curve of my chest plate beneath the thin gown, an uncomfortable reminder that my body had been both a weapon and a ruin. They transferred me onto a gurney, and I felt myself tilt and slide, every motion a jolt across bruised bones. Nurses hustled around, adjusting IV lines, checking monitors, murmuring to one another in clipped tones. I caught fragments: contractor, roll 3, hesitation, cardiac arrest. The words felt like accusations and absolutions all at once. Down the corridor, the gurney rattled over tile seams. My head lolled against the metal rail, and I glimpsed faces behind observation windows. A nurse pausing in her charting. A surgeon stepping out of an operating room with wide eyes. Each bore the same question. How did he return? They wheeled me into the intensive care unit and settled me into a bed surrounded by a chorus of machines. A nasal cannula fed a steady stream of oxygen into my nostrils, and cool gel on my chest powered the heart monitor's blinking squiggle. The ventilator's hiss was a constant companion, and every beep sounded a cautionary note. Stay alive. As they left me to stabilize, I lay staring at the ceiling tiles, countless squares that had become my sky. My body felt alien, tubes where there should have been skin, bruises blooming like black flowers, my spine aching from the trauma of that superhuman crawl. I tried to summon the memory of the gray expanse, of weightless freedom, but pain clutched at the edges of my mind like a vice. A wave of nausea rolled over me, and I shut my eyes against the bile rising in my throat. I tasted the hospital air, faintly sweet, tainted with disinfectant, and remembered the hush of the void, the cool nothingness that had cradled me. In that silent moment, I realized part of me still hovered there, hesitant to rejoin this realm of flesh and blood. Footsteps approached, and a nurse appeared, her eyebrows knitting in concern. She pressed a damp cloth to my forehead and offered a small smile. "You gave us quite the scare." Her words were gentle, but their weight bore down like an anchor. I nodded once, too weak to thank her. I wanted to tell her that nothing had ever felt so alive, or so terrifying. Left alone again, I turned my head to see the doorway. Sunlight streamed in, gilding dust motes that danced like embers. Outside stood my wife, arms crossed, lips pressed into a line of worry. Her eyes locked onto mine, and relief washed over her face in slow motion. She stepped forward, and I felt the pull of home stronger than any gravity. "I thought I lost you," she whispered, voice cracking. I tried to speak, but managed only a hoarse, I was there." She sank onto the chair beside my bed, taking my hand and pressing it to her cheek. In her warmth, the terror of return eased slightly, replaced by something fiercer. Purpose. That night, as monitors hummed like steady heartbeats around us, I lay awake, listening to the rhythm of my body, the thump of heart, the rasp of lungs, the dull ache of every wound. My mind replayed the threshold I'd crossed. The flash of the IED, the agonizing crawl, the silence of oblivion, the embrace of the tree's roots, and my family's forgiveness. Now, the world of pain and imperfection beckoned me back, demanding I carry its lessons forward. In the days that followed, skepticism turned to wonder. Doctors and nurses visited with hushed awe. One surgeon, known for his stern pragmatism, stood by my bed and said, "If this doesn't change your life, nothing will." I wanted to tell him I'd already been changed, ripped apart and put back together, carrying within me a warmth no scalpel could remove. But for now, I closed my eyes and let the beeping machines guide me back to rest. My flesh was broken, but my spirit, anchored in that boundless glow, would endure. And when morning came, I would rise, staggeringly alive, ready to live as if every heartbeat was borrowed time. In the jarring re-entry from death's brink, I had rediscovered my own fragility and, paradoxically, my true strength. Once the tracheostomy tube was removed, I found myself navigating the Dubai hotel lobby, intent on demonstrating my recovery. Yet the pain persisted, every breath serving as a stark reminder that I had defied death, but bore its lasting marks. I woke before dawn in a sterile hospital room, windows masked by white curtains that refused to admit the sun. My throat felt raw, a cavern of soreness where the tracheostomy had been. I reached up and touched the smooth scar at my neck, the finger pad returning sticky with antiseptic residue. In the half-light, I could see the fatigue etched into my nurse's face as she charted my vitals. Her eyes flicked up when she noticed my stirring. She offered a small, tired smile. "Good morning," she said softly. "Tube's out. You're breathing on your own." I nodded, chest tightening. The first full breath without mechanical aid roared in like a tidal wave, tearing through every stitch of my lungs. Pain bloomed beneath my ribs, deeper than any phantom agony, as though the void I'd touched had burned a memory into my flesh. I clenched the bedsheets, white and scratchy against my palms, and closed my eyes until the room tilted back into focus. They discharged me that afternoon, and I found myself wheeling a suitcase through the airport, each step a negotiation between resolve and raw vulnerability. The Dubai heat wrapped around me, humid and unforgiving. My wife met me at the arrivals gate, her eyes red-rimmed but shining with relief. She collapsed into my arms, pressing a kiss against my cheek so fervent I tasted the faint tang of her lipstick. Home in Fort Worth felt like another world. The heat was different, the light more forgiving. Our house stood quiet, a testament to the life I'd nearly abandoned. I dropped my bag by the front door and stepped inside, the floor cool beneath my bare feet. Photographs looked back at me. Wedding day smiles frozen in time, playground snapshots of nieces and nephews. I touched each frame as though blessing them, feeling a tremor of gratitude. My return was anything but seamless. Simple tasks, tying shoelaces, climbing stairs, sent shards of pain lancing through my side. Each morning, I awoke with the taste of copper on my tongue and the echo of my heart monitor's flatline in my ears. I haunted the pharmacy counter for painkillers, but felt an immediate shame at the cashier's raised eyebrow. I'd promised myself no more self-medication, no escape routes for the agony that now felt like an unwelcome companion. Habit Shift 1. I embraced physical therapy as a daily ritual. Where once I'd seen PT as a chore, now it was pilgrimage. Each stretch, each reluctant bend of muscle, was a testament to survival. I traded painkillers for ice packs and gentle massage, learning to listen to the difference between healing discomfort and destructive pain. Over weeks, I measured progress in degrees of motion. 10 degrees more extension, 5 degrees less twinge. Each small gain felt like reclaiming a piece of territory stolen by injury. Habit Shift 2. I sought community in unexpected places. I joined an online support group for wounded veterans and contractors. Posting my story, unedited, raw, felt like yanking open a wound. But responses poured in. I've been there. Thank you for sharing. Your scars are honorable. I realized I wasn't alone in my bitterness or my longing for meaning. In those messages, I found a space to grieve and to connect, a reminder that even in survival, community could be salvation. Habit Shift 3. I reestablished faith on my own terms. Religion had always felt obligatory, a hollow ritual I performed to appease my mother and grandparents. Yet, during my NDE, I'd glimpsed a realm led by unconditional love and moral reckoning. I began studying comparative theology, Sufi poetry one day, Buddhist koans the next, seeking not to proselytize but to understand. I meditated on forgiveness and penance, reading St. Augustine's Confessions and Rumi's verses in tandem. My faith emerged as a quilt of teaching sewn together by personal revelation rather than inherited doctrine. In social settings, I stuttered through explanations. How I'd crawled 250 yards with a collapsed lung, how my heart had stopped twice, how I'd met family members long dead beneath an ancient tree. Colleagues listened, eyes wide, some smiled politely, others exchanged hushed glances. I learned to modulate my storytelling, offering details slowly, gauging sincerity before describing visions of gray plains and root-woven light. Few could grasp the gravity of what I'd seen, but many admitted they'd never considered the possibility of life after death until I spoke. One evening, I attended a small gathering at a friend's house. He lit candles in a darkened living room for what he called a gratitude circle. Each person named something they cherished: children, health, home. When it came to me, I paused, inhaling the scent of beeswax and motes dancing in the flamelight. I said, I'm grateful for every breath, for every scar that reminds me I'm alive. The room was silent, and I felt the truth of my words settle like ashes. Professionally, I pivoted away from counterinsurgency logistics. I began volunteering at a local crisis center, training staff on trauma-informed care and emergency response. My experience under fire and on the operating table gave me a credibility I'd never earned in a boardroom. I saw clients huddled in grief, eyes hollow with loss, and I taught them breathing techniques I'd use to reorient myself when pain threatened to swallow hope. In their breakthroughs, tears of relief, first smiles in days, I found a new purpose. Yet some days remained shadows of despair. I slipped into old habits, nursing a scotch late at night to dull the ache that no foam roller could touch. My wife found me in the kitchen, glass in hand, head bowed. Without judgment, she poured the drink into the sink and held me as I trembled. In that moment, I realized that healing wasn't linear. It was a dance between light and darkness, progress and setback. When I felt bitterness rising, I recalled the gale force pain of the crawl to my friend's hooch, the taste of utter helplessness, and the presence of my grandfather's father warning me of hell's fire. I remembered the immense relief of being pulled back, the shock of corporeal return, and the gentle hush of the gray plains. Those memories grounded me in gratitude, reminding me that life, even laced with pain, was infinitely precious. Every day I breathe, I carry within me both the echo of oblivion and the seed of renewal, a testament that even in penance there can be redemption, and in survival there can be purpose.
Hello everyone, I'm the creator of this channel. Thank you so much for watching. Your support means everything. Please hit the like button, subscribe for more stories, and share your own experiences in the comments below. Remember, God watches over you and every day is a gift. May your life be filled with blessings.